The Philips 34B2U5600C offers an interesting proposition for those who want a budget ultra-wide monitor for productivity. Indeed, it sports a 21:9 aspect ratio with a curved 34-inch VA panel, which operates a resolution of 1440p and a refresh rate that goes up to 120Hz. Better still, there is a built-in KVM switch, USB Type-C, HDMI and DisplayPort connectivity options, and even an RJ45 port. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it can be found for £440. And in this video, which has been sponsored by the manufacturer, I'll be covering everything you need to know about it so you can make your own informed purchasing decision. So jumping straight in, let's talk about the overall image quality. And here via the monitor's OSD, you have got a dedicated sRGB mode, which gives you full brightness controls, which is certainly appreciated. Now, using my calibrators, I noticed a gamut coverage of 90.8% and a gamut volume of 93.5%, at least in comparison to the sRGB standard. Below you can see how it compares to the color space. The average LT clocked in at 1.42 with a maximum of 4.91, so therefore it can be used for serious image editing work or indeed video grading. The tested contrast ratio came in at 3,325:1 with a measured white point at 6,168 Kelvin at 100%. As for its gamma curve, it sits relatively close to the 2.2 standards. Now, switching the monitor to the 6500 Kelvin preset instead, you'll be able to see that the gamut coverage and gamut volumes have been affected, namely in the Adobe RGB and DCI-P3 spaces. Concentrating on the former, you can see it hit 81.8% in gamut coverage and 88% in gamut volume. Below you can see how it compares to the Adobe RGB standards. As for the average LTE, it sits at 3.36 with a maximum of 7.73, so therefore you will not want to use it for serious image editing work in the Adobe RGB or indeed the DCI-P3 color spaces. Note the latter was not shown on the video. Now, the tested contrast ratio does not change, while the measured white point does slightly shift at 6,263 Kelvin at 100%. As for its gamma curve, it yet again sits relatively close to the 2.2 standard, but isn't as tight as what we saw before with the sRGB mode. Past the overall color performance, let's talk about brightness, and here it'll get up to 320 nits, although in the sRGB mode it will be capped at 312 nits. Now, it's great to see that you have also got a minimum brightness of 16 nits, and therefore this monitor can be used in both a bright sunlit room and one that is completely pitch black. On that note, I should talk about the overall brightness uniformity, and of course I do appreciate it's somewhat panel lottery, but on my tested panel you'll be able to see how the monitor performed. The same could be said about the overall backlight bleed. These images were taken in a completely pitch black environment, and given this monitor has got a VA panel, it won't have as much sort of bleed as what you'll find in an IPS alternative. Next up, let's talk about text clarity, and as a reminder, you have got a 34-inch curved VA panel that operates a resolution of 3440x1440p, giving it a pixel density of 109.68. In my case, I had no issues whatsoever when it came to text legibility, and thanks to its ultra-wide format, it meant that I could snap windows to the left and the right. The curved format is also appreciated if you want that extra bit of immersion. Now, it's also worth mentioning over here that you have got a matte coating to it, therefore means you're not going to get any sort of glare if you've got any sort of windows positioned behind you. You have also got a flicker-free panel, which means you're not going to get any sort of eye strain, and on that note, you've also got a small little power sensor at the front of the monitor. This not only will detect if you're away from the monitor itself, therefore reducing your overall energy usage, but will also be handy for the monitor to automatically adjust the overall brightness, and therefore means it'll always give you the right sort of brightness that you'll require depending on your own ambient light conditions. So what about when it comes to productivity? Well, this monitor has got two 5-watt speakers built in, and therefore they will suffice for basic music listening or indeed Windows notifications. Better still, you've got a built-in KVM switch, which effectively allows you to plug in your peripherals directly into the monitor, for example your mouse and keyboard, and then use the monitor with two different sources, for example a desktop computer and also a laptop. I had no issues whatsoever when it came to switching between the sources myself. If you want some more information as to how a KVM switch actually operates, make sure you check out my dedicated video of this up on your pop-up banner or by following the links down in the description below. Now, better still, you've got that RJ45 port, which means you can deliver up to 1 gigabit of internet to a laptop via the USB Type-C input. Indeed, over here, a compact laptop which will not have an RJ45 port, or indeed might be limited by its overall Wi-Fi capacities, means that you can actually get faster speeds on the laptop itself. Very handy also if you're in a work scenario. Aside from all this, I should point out that you've got two HDMI 2.0 ports which will deliver 1440p at up to 100Hz, while the singular DisplayPort 1.4 input and the USB Type-C port will deliver 1440p at up to 120Hz. Now, I should also mention over here that the USB Type-C port will drive up to 96 watts of power, which can be handy if you're going to be connecting up a laptop because it'll simultaneously charge it while also being utilized as a secondary display. Now, in terms of the other ports that you should be aware of, well, underneath you've got two USB Type-A ports, and there's also that USB Type-C port which can be used for data only. Handy, for example, if you've got a modern flash drive, or of course, if you're going to be utilizing the built-in KVM switch with your desktop computer, you're going to have to utilize this port in order to connect it up to the desktop computer in question. Now, on the side of the monitor, more specifically on the left-hand side, you've got two USB Type-A ports, one of which has got fast charging capabilities, a singular USB Type-C port, which will drive up to 15 watts of power, and also a audio/microphone combo jack, which can be handy if you do want to plug in your earphones or indeed headphones. On that note, there's a small pop-out stand which can be found on the left-hand side of the monitor, which can be useful if you're going to be, for example, placing your headphones or earphones just by your monitor. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about its overall build quality, and here you've got a three-side borderless design with a relatively thin bottom bezel. It's also nice to see that you have got a very sturdy stand which provides you tilt, swivel and height adjustments. In case you do want to replace the stand or want to place it on a multi-monitor setup, you can do so because it's VESA compatible. Now, there are a few physical buttons positioned at the bottom right-hand side of the monitor, and therefore makes it very easy to access the monitor's OSD, which in itself is very comprehensively laid out and provides you all the right options that you'll require, including if you do want to adjust the volume or indeed some of the other settings that I mentioned throughout this video. Now, to conclude, I would just like to have a quick word for gamers, and indeed this monitor is not a gaming-centric panel, and therefore that's not the focus. However, if you do want to game on the side, you will be pleased to know that this 34-inch curved VA panel gives you minimal amount of VA smearing, and there's also minimal amount of inverse ghosting as well. Therefore, it'll certainly suffice if you're playing more casual games, thanks to the fact that you have got that 1440p resolution, that 34-inch 21:9 aspect ratio, and that extra bit of fluidity thanks to its refresh rate that goes up to 120Hz. So there we have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed my detailed overview of the Philips 34B2U5600C. I'll be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. If you have enjoyed this video, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Totally Dubbed and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.